you get into asset management. So one of the things that I always saw when you work on sourcing and client engagements, no matter if you're an MSP, a VAR, or an agent, is you don't go deep into asset management. And so on a lot of mid-market, small enterprise clients, they don't do that. Global enterprise, I mean, Phil ran a $4 billion company, they did it. And so a lot of this is what would a $4 billion company do and provide versus what a small business might provide. Now, building rapid scale, a large global cloud solutions provider, I sold that to Cox. Cox had a lot of small businesses, and small businesses didn't manage contracts very well. People get frustrated. MSPs, they're basically running contracts for their clients, but they only handle a subset of the services. They don't handle everything. So often an advisor will come in or somebody else will come in. So we wanted to put everything in one place. So asset management, contract management is the foundation. This is specific to a client experience. And so you're going to hear me use this terminology called IT optimization. And so in order to optimize IT, you have to understand the contract, the data, and the assets that the company has. Once you categorize that, once you store that, I can have an IT leader go and the next person can come in and you have the data. And so a lot of times consultants come in and a new one comes in because they bring in somebody else and they go, I don't know what to do. And then they bring in their friend because they don't know what's on site, they don't know what the data looks like. So how do you eliminate the problem? You eliminate the problem by building the data store. And so this is all about data, uploading files, inputting files, all of that. Some of our clients we're doing it for, and some of our clients we're doing it with, and some of our clients we're hybrid doing it together. And so it's a relationship build around their data, their story. Let's go to asset management. So under the asset, well, I just want to say this, because asset management is really the build out of the individual assets. Phone systems, okay, you have a UCaaS system. Well, how many phones do you have? Where are the phones identified? Who has what phones? So starting to build out all the assets and giving that to a small, medium business, small enterprise business is what they want. So you're building their IT story and you're building it through the data they have. And so we're building all of that into a story. So you're going to hear IT procurement. You're going to also hear managed IT procurement. And so when it comes to optimization, you can't optimize something if you don't know what you have. And so we're building that into one interface for IT.
Real quick, because I see description, services not being leveraged, do not renew.
Got it. So the way we look at it is the contract is a higher level, and assets are physical or virtual components that are associated with a contract itself. So as you're looking at this is a line item on the contract, line item on the invoice. So in this case, we have 85 phone systems, well, phone licenses that we're managing as a virtual asset. Normally, IT departments don't have a place to store notes. So as you have all these line items for whatever contract, whether it's Box, Dropbox, Salesforce, you have all these line items and all these licenses. So we have the ability to kind of use, and every client uses the assets in a different way from a physical or virtual perspective. So you have the ability to basically say, listen, I want to put this in here as a physical line item. This is going to represent 85 lines. You see it at what, 275 or 279 a device. Placeholder. Once again, you've got to have a place to store this stuff. And then over here, when it comes time to renewal, that's our notes on the renewal. So it's an opportunity to have a place to store your notes, to actually have discussions. Because one of the things, and this was, it's interesting you bring this up. One of the coolest things that I found early in working at Advantage Solutions, great company, loved it, worked there for 12 years. And I got more done from an IT perspective when I partnered as an IT leader, when I partnered hand in hand with procurement. Because if you don't partner with procurement, you're going to fight with procurement. So it's really one of those two choices right there. So it was like, hey, listen, my buddy in procurement over here is the SVP of procurement and tax. I literally gave him all the details. This is what I'm doing. This is how I'm doing. And he kept on looking at me going, Phil, I just want to make sure we're getting a good deal. I want to make sure you've done the validation, that you looked at your alternate solutions, that you validated this is the direction you want to go, and then let's negotiate. Fantastic. Let's do it. So this now became, so I had in the past my own collaborative solutions that I built and designed within SharePoint or my other repositories. But most clients, most people that I talk to don't have that. And when I talk to them about, hey, where do you store your contracts? How do you know your contract terms and commitments? Well, and this is the fun part right here. Well, we have a SharePoint site or we have a file repository, and typically we always get caught with the evergreen clauses. And so the evergreen clauses are all the milestones right there in red. If you don't notify the supplier by that evergreen clause trigger point, you're automatically renewed for another year. Or three. And so we want to get ahead of that game. You may stay with that provider. You may say, hey, guess what? Momentum is the fantastic, I love it, fantastic solution. I've got a 3-year agreement. It's due in March 2025. I want to let you know February 1st, because there's a 30-day notice. I want to let you know 30 days before, let's renew the contract terms and conditions. Let's renegotiate. I don't want to move, but I have a fiduciary responsibility into the organization to make sure that I'm working with you the best, because our agreement that we made 3 years ago was about the implementation. Now we're in a steady state. And so all of a sudden it gives you different opportunities to have those discussions.
Yeah, so if we go from here and we go to the IT data pack. So IT data pack's a quantitative, qualitative data set. So past life, I did a lot of reporting. It was under PwC. I had a consulting engagement with them for a while to do IT consulting and advising. And we would build a data set. We would get all the data come into SharePoint. We gather the data. The analysts would look through the data. Then we would build reports. It was manual, okay? And so I'm like, okay, how do we build a reporting system for a client? How do we build an interface for a client to drop all their data, their documents, and their information? And so what we've done is we've started this build of how do the agents and how do the consultants and how do IT teams get delivered a strategy that they can deliver a board and deliver an executive team. And so we're in the early phases of building a state-of-the-art interface that will be able to compete with the PwCs, the EYs, and the Accentures, because we're building templated models to map out IT strategies, make them visual, build them into software, and actually deploy a strategy for engagement. When you go contract, here's what we used to do. Contract is just a trigger at an end date for a renewal. The question is, do you let it auto renew or do you go in and negotiate? And what happens, often clients don't negotiate and they don't know what the price should be. And so they just go, okay, I'm comfortable with it. They get lazy. And so how do you actually create this model to where you trigger it all the way through? You know every asset, where the asset is, what the service is, what the competitors are on the space, because a lot of times people don't want to change providers, and we see this all the time, but they don't feel like they're getting the best price. So somebody else comes in and says, I'm going to give you a better price. But how do they know what a better price is? So if I get a better price with a shitty provider, well, what's that do for me? And so a lot of times it's like, where's the data that tells the story? Every facet of this data that tells the story will be built into a system, go down, which is what we do. We keep going through, we gather considerations, gather proprietary data, gather their data set, keep going. And this is only going to get better. This is really kind of early phase. If you look at the big boys, they do this capability. So what are your current capabilities? Then they go into observations, and then they go into outcomes. That's their model. And they charge $300 to $500 an hour to do this at PwC Accenture. I was a part of it, and I've seen it when I ran Cox. I said they did to us. And so the channel is actually, the relationships with IT advisors, being an MSP or V2VAR, can do the same thing, but it's bringing professional consulting and engaging models, tools, and a place to live to that business practice overall. Because you want to own the client. You want to own the client experience across the board. And the client wants you to own the experience. Most of the time, clients are like, I wish you could do more for me. You only do my circuits, or you only do my UCaaS, or you're good at network, and then you got a VAR or an MSP over here that says, okay, I can give you your compute, but I'm not good at this. And really what the story the provider wants, or the buyer wants, is they want a synergistic location where they can buy C data and have this experience from one person, not 5 different people. And they want one person to control that outcome or that experience. They want 5 different people to do it. And that one person is often just the quarterback. And where are the relationships that reside off of that? And so keep going down. We get into go deeper. Here, we start getting into analysis. And we start getting into quantitative, qualitative analysis. So the quantitative is this. The qualitative is the other side. And this is the way we ran at PwC. We did a qualitative analysis of data gathering on the information, what the company wants. Okay? I want this. I have this trigger. I was sitting there talking to Brad yesterday, and I'm like, holy shit, you just threw something at me that I didn't even know existed, which is a gateway for AI into an AI interface with the ability to mask the data and use AI in a way that I didn't even know existed today. I knew it existed in the UCaaS world. You hear Copilot, you hear all these things. We're digging in with Salesforce and their data cloud in every facet. You hear agents coming out, but how do you deploy it for a business? And so the clients are wondering how you deploy it for a business too. Like, how do you do it for me? And so the next iteration is how do you implement AI and build a more valuable business where revenue growth and optimizing expenses is actually done in a way in which a tool uses the tool sets, not just people. Okay. And people get frustrated hearing that, but it's very reality oriented. And so if we look at this, this is a qualitative data set that we're building tools that actually auto-populate this data. And so these are built into files, and from those files, they get pulled off of our data pack. So imagine AI pulling the data, inputting the data, and starting to build reports. And so we're doing that right now as a part of this overall model, and we're building the foundation because the number one component of the foundation is data input. The more data we get, the better the output we can provide. If you go down, the ultimate is to go through this process and then you drop it down. And in this case, it was a client, and we don't make decisions. Everybody goes, oh, well, you're the consultant, so you're trying to direct it to one provider. The reality is we don't make a decision. And so, what I always tell people is like, it's not our job to make a decision. It's our job to put the best technology in front of a client and for the client to make that decision. And when the client makes a decision, they have to choose who they're going to go with. In this case, it's a drop down, and they chose Dialpad. And in this case, they chose Dialpad because they could turn up, this is a true story, they turned up, in this case, which is really unique, a CCaaS solution in the Philippines within 3 days. And it was one of those things, we went to the different companies and said, can you do this? And they said, we need this. We're the third largest AT&T store chain in the United States. We're growing immensely, and we're starting to build out a Philippines team to handle some of AT&T's needs because they're trying to outsource some of their business. And so we couldn't go to anybody else and get it done. So point of this is, these are data sets and data insights inside of there that were going to be built out. So every client lives within this world. So go to the data pack again, Phil. Inside of there, you can build your own file sets. You can build out your data sets. Clients are having us build file sets. All of this is AI scannable. Every document is here is AI scannable to pull data out of the AI. So if I want to pull data out of the AI on any one of these documents, I can ask and it'll be pulled out automatically. I can pull that data. And so every piece of data in here as a file is accessible via AI. And so what we're building is input the data. Let's figure out how the bots or the agents start to work with the data. We need it to live within a world in which we can speak to or communicate with, which is your data. So I think we're going to go from there, and we'll start to talk about project management. We'll take 2 minutes to talk about project management. So from a project management standpoint, I'm not going to go too deep, but we're in an era where a provider delivers a project, and when they deliver that project, the partner consulting or engaging isn't often aware of the idiosyncrasies, the issues, and the challenges. And so what we find here is that we built a platform, we're doing it, and then eventually we feed into the APIs with the different providers. When you feed in the API from the different providers, we want that to be real-time data on the projects. We don't want to wonder where that data is. It should be two-way facing. Building a global managed service provider, I can tell you, this was something that wasn't there a long time ago in the sense of pushing it out. Partners can do this, but I'd rather see the partners' notes and information with the provider and their inputs or outputs or the solution. So how do you implement together, not standalone? And a lot of times they need our help for escalation, they need our help for problem solving, they need our help for resolving issues, and we're in the dark, meaning somebody delivering the service or partnering to deliver the service. And so we're trying to overcome that by building a set of PM tools that'll actually tell that story on an ongoing basis. So project by project, if you have 4 of them, you're going to see 4 different windows here. There's a team that does project management for all of this on our end. So every project is individually managed all the way through it. So now I'm going to touch on SaaS FinOps. This is Phil's thing. I'm going to take it from today because he's, I feel it today. I'm feeling it today. Okay.
What are you feeling today?
I'm feeling a little edgy. I walked in, I expected like 10. I'm like, some smiling. So the edge is that this shit excites me. I couldn't be more excited about this. At the same time, trying to do an early story is challenging. So this is SaaS FinOps. So Phil did this as a function for a large enterprise, and then it did eventually this, and he did the cloud FinOps or subset of this for like Nike, New Balance, Korn Ferry, global companies.
Yeah, so the big thing with SaaS FinOps is we need the ability to kind of see two things. One, how your users are logging into your infrastructure, into your services. So we tie into Azure, Entra, Okta, G Suite, and we basically pull in your application information. Everybody's application information is different. How you want to bring it together is different. So every instance of this is going to be unique to a client experience, 100%. So on the left, you have your users. On the top, you basically have your applications. So the applications show you how often users are logging into various services. So if I hover over and just use Zoom as a good example over here, I always love picking on my good friend Alexa over here. But Alexa, I see over here, as you log into see over here, Alexa's logged in 5 times. That just shows how many times her identity access provider was called to authenticate in. Has nothing to do with how much she's using Zoom or anything like that. It just shows that over the course of the last 14 days, and here's the cool thing, Azure only stores your login data for 30 days. We're actually bringing it in and storing it indefinitely for you. Okay, so that's a key thing right there.
By the way, that is a huge thing. People do not realize it. So dealing with big companies and doing this and running Cox as a subset, we always had the issue of legal and HR wanting to know how they could exit an employee out, and legal and HR incoming saying, what data do you have on that employee? And so user analytics on employee exits are a major cost for companies, and you can't package the data right now easily for user analytics for HR and legal with regards to this type of data. So we're building this data set to where you can start to integrate and build this story for user analytics. Is the person working or are they not? It looks their data and the data is in the software, okay? Because no matter if it's a RingCentral, a Momentum, a Zoom, you're doing data, you're pulling it in, you're scraping it, you're building transcripts now.
Yep.
You're storing all the calls. All these calls can be stored in the IT data pack too, as well. So all of these key calls and integration calls and all these stuff, we can pull the data in too. So this whole thing is meant to tell the story around every facet of the user experience. This goes back to a passion I found in 2000 and probably 11 around virtual desktop, because I always felt like you could tell the user experience because you could see the apps in one single interface, okay? And then all of a sudden you get to web apps, you can't do that anymore. So how do you access that? And this is where Phil's experience around using and getting a hold of the single sign-on and basically building out a model to ingest data and then start to manage it as a story and output the story was something that was a blessing to me, because I couldn't visualize this. I knew what my vision was, but I couldn't visualize that you could pull this and then you could go manage this data and you can hand it to an IT team that says, I need to exit this person out.
Yep.
Here you go, legal. Here you go, HR. It's at your fingertips.
Please, absolutely.
So the tools up top.
Yep.
These
The-
tools scan the application, or you have to enter it?
No, these are your applications.
Right,
So
yeah.
every application, so when you sign into,
She's actually asking how you gathered
Yep,
that
I'm gonna
data.
go.
Yeah.
Yep. So if you look over here, as you highlight over, every application we kind of put into a category. So we tie into your identity access provider. Are you an Azure shop?
Yeah.
Okay, so we would tie into Azure Entra. When we bring into Azure Entra, every one of your single sign-on applications has what's called an application ID. This is your long application ID. It's a GUID that's specific to that application. We then take that GUID and say, what is it specific for you? If it's already named there, we're bringing down the name. And then we have, so for example, you see Office 365 is there. I have the ability to break out Office 365 and say, listen, I want to report on how many times people are logging into Copilot, into Teams, into various services. Or you know what? Maybe another client says, just bring it all together. I don't want to look at SQL and Office 365 and what is their Copilot thing? Again, I don't want to look at it separately. I want to bring it all together. So we can expand, contract your data reporting, all based on this data element that we have in our database.
But if they don't go through the Azure or Okta, they just go to the website. Can it be like?
I love you for answering that. Put a pin in that one, and I'm going to take you to my Zoom example in a minute. Okay? Got a good Zoom example. No. Your Zoom. I'm going to use a Zoom example in a minute that you're going to love. And by the way, there's two different answers on that one. One, you brought up YouTube versus an application. So if you wanted like a YouTube experience and saying, where are my users going? That's where we need to get into web filtering. So web filtering is a component, and there's a lot of different ways of doing it. Happy to talk to you about that. Web filtering is the ability to say, where are my users going on their managed devices? Here's a managed mobile device. Here's a managed computer. I want to control where they're going and what they have access to and what they don't. So that's mobile device, basically email filtering, if you will, or device filtering from a control perspective. This is showing you where they're signing in. And then what's nice, just to continue on this one, is if you're doing your renewals, and let's say I'm doing my renewal on Lucid, for example, I happen to know that Lucid uses every time I go into Lucid, I'm actually signing in. So this shows me my Lucid usage from October through January, 4 users, 2 users, 3 users, 4 users, how they're using it over time. So if all of a sudden I'm looking at it going, I have a renewal, I have 10 licenses. Why am I buying 10 licenses when only 4 people are using it? Guys, we got a discrepancy here. So Peter Drucker said it best, you can't manage what you can't measure. We're giving you the measurements tools so you can do fact-based decision making for driving,
You
future.
build out to see who those 4, those 2.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So you can actually go in here, and then so if you're looking at, let's just use the application. Since you brought it up, I will go and show you. So there's my Lucid over there, and maybe I'm looking at Lucid over the course of the last, basically, let's just look at over the past quarter. So right here, I can see here, these are the people that have used it, and maybe I'm looking at it, if I can actually use my mouse, that's the key thing here. So I'm looking for the previous quarter, let's say. So here are the people that have used Lucid, and I can see who they are and when how they logged in.
And then the bigger squares, the more.
Yeah, so like I use it often, so like I'm the biggest, so I logged into it 10 times, for example, over that period of time. And then we can design these reports. So if there's a report that you're looking for, I would like to see it like this. We can look at that and develop that for you. So that's that. The login analysis, I'll just show you this one real quick, is the ability to see where your users are logging in. So all of a sudden going back to the HR situation, where are my users logging in from? I've got Eli. Eli's supposed to be based in Texas. Why is Eli working out of Canada right now? I knew that guy was. So it's an opportunity to have that discussion on where these people are logging in from and so forth. Azure. 100%. It has to be from the identity provider.
Now we have to look at like manually.
Exactly. So you're gonna love this. So that is just straight single sign-on information. Then you have the supplier analytics. Supplier analytics is where we dive deeper into specific analytics. And so I'm going to show you 2 examples on the supplier analytics. First is our UCaaS side. We've got Zoom enabled. Apologize, guys. We've got Zoom enabled on this one. We're working on
we have user data.
We've got user data, and we're working on getting additional user data for additional UCaaS, CCaaS, and other components. So over here, to your point, it showed you that Alexa logged into Zoom 3 times. That's how often that's how many times in the past 14 days she authenticated in. This right here now is I can see my license exposure across the board. I can see Zoom meetings. And if I hover over this right there, I can actually see on this one specifically, in January 2025, it's not that she logged in 3 times, but she actually hosted 24 meetings. She had 76 participants, and she had over 3,500 meeting minutes. And so I can see how often through the heat map, how often people are using it. So if anybody's ever wondering how hard Randy's working, we can always kind of come over here and see the amount of meetings he's holding, how often he's on the phone. Reality is he talks too much. And so this is our proof.
Minutes right there.
There's his minutes of talk time. So, but it shows us specifically, and you can get into the Zoom phone usage. So this is now where we kind of go in here, inbound, outbound as the organization. But even better yet, once again, making fun of Alexa since she's not here, is I can see, okay, wait a second. She only had 3 inbound calls and no outbound calls for January. But then you come down here and we got Manami. Manami had 10 inbound, and over here, she had 120 outbound. So quick analytics, how people are leveraging the platforms, looking at an organization. And I was just showing Randy this earlier. It's like, here's our inbound connections. Why do we have 76 calls that are left unanswered? Are those clients calling? Are those support calls that are happening? Why are those unanswered?
And so one of the components, just to press through this, is It's all about building supplier analytics. So if you're looking at this, all supplier analytics, RingCentral, Momentum, they're going to be in here and they're going to have an API interface. I'll have APIs. Gathering the data off of this and being able to tell their story. Okay. People don't want to go to 5 to 10 different portals. They just don't want to do it for IT. They want one interface. When people think about what the Apple iStore done for them, they go, it's one interface. Everything's there. So the world's gone to this B2B platform model. Some of my best friends run some of the biggest companies in the world, and everything's been moving in that direction. So how do they control more? How are they seen as a platform? An example, O'Neill Clothing, La Jolla Group, they own multiple brands. They're going to a platform business model because they can have brands partner with them and deploy, and they got the infrastructure to do that. And so there's all these components of doing this. And so I'm going to shoot through a couple others out of respect for those that are here. But you got SaaS FinOps, and then on the compute side, you got Cloud FinOps.
You want to show just Office 365 super quick, or
We'll go back to that in a second. So one thing I'll say is that managing compute is something that I've been passionate about. And so managing compute, understanding compute, when to eliminate it, when to add it, what's needed is what this platform is about. This is all about API feeds off your real-time data. So your real-time data on your compute, server storage, CPU, RAM storage. If I go into the application above it, I can go deeper into every facet. So right now we got a call this morning. A client, I'll let Phil talk about it briefly, but the client has $1.2 million in monthly spend on Azure, and they need somebody to do Cloud FinOps as a managed practice, because that's a lot of money to spend every single month. But nobody's managing that compute, the little idiosyncrasies, the optimization of that compute. And so no matter if it's a big company or a small company, everybody's running into the same problem. Who's seeing my data? Okay. And so as we tell this story around who's seeing my data, you're going to hear this terminology, I believe, especially because it's coming out in publications and everything else, over IT optimization over the next couple of years. Who's optimizing my platforms? And so this slide here, which talks about, which you can't see it right now.
wow, I swear to God, there's a map there of the world.
Yeah, but go to this.
Get out
So
of
there's
there.
a thing called waste detector. If you go to waste detector too, it just literally tells you where your waste is on your spend. And so this is a small subset, but there's large customers that we're analyzing their compute spend, where they're spending the money, what this looks like, and we're saving that money in different places. And so it's conversations. You can save 2,000 here, 1,000 here. You could save 100 here. It shouldn't be a sourcing project every couple years. It should be on an ongoing basis. And so how do you eliminate this? I mean, this is where the PwCs, Accentures, and others have lived in the enterprise. They do it project by project. But once you take one project, you implement it, and you implement the tools that tell the story, you shouldn't come back to that start point, especially can I start to predict your spend. With scale comes decreased pricing. Where's your price point? Okay, and so we're working on and building out all the strategies related to managing compute and managing compute from an optimization perspective, managing applications from an optimization resource perspective, what's needed, what's not needed. And then the third pillar, if we come out of here, because this is very in-depth application, if we go to this TEM practice, it's expense management. So technology expense management, for those and anybody that understand it, is all about managing your expenses for IT. And there's a ton of fake bills for AI. There's a lot of fake AI-driven bills that are out there today. And so what we're finding is, how do you eliminate that concern? You ingest all of the billing data and you tell that story back to the client. And you either pay it for them and take the risk of that, meaning you got insurance for that, or give it to the client and the client pays the bill. But today they want to know, is the address the same? Is the account number the same? Where's the bill location going to? Who am I paying? What's the resource associated to? Is a resource line up? If there's an issue with resource versus expense, which they might not notice from an AP perspective, then you got to flag that. And so all of these tool sets we've been building and deploying and are now adding a lot of customers on, and we are adding customers through partners that are literally bringing this software to companies. So Cactus to us is a partner that is starting to bring this technology to companies and deploy it. And so this is core to the foundation. If we go out of this, I think I'll make one last comment if we go out here to more. There's support cases too, and supplier insights. Supplier insights is actually really cool, but support cases, if you have an issue and you need something escalated, we take an escalation and handle escalations. And so it's very key that we do that all as a platform, and it's part of our platform value. And then the last one, I think I'll do supplier insights. So one comment is this: there's 3 pillars that you're going to see that I speak to. It's expense, resource, and supplier insights. Okay. You have 3 very financially stable companies in here: Momentum, Expedient, RingCentral. They all have different cycles of growth, different cycles of challenges too. It's all part of building a long-term business. They've all been around for a long time. They're adding new entities, and people get nervous about that. And so people want financial insights on the companies. So building out the financial story for the company, every company is going to have financial insights, and pulling as much data as possible. And so financial insights, insights on trends with the company. You can start talking to your data and asking questions. Well, is that provider stable? When did they have a layoff? When's the last time they had an outage? It's literally going to be at their fingertip, all able for somebody to make the decision. So insights on suppliers, where does that sit today? It's really go figure it out. Rely on somebody else. So as we tell this story, which I'm excited because we're in the early phases of telling the story is going to be at your fingertips. What are my resources? What are my expenses? And what are my suppliers' insights and information? What new products did they launch? How did they launch it? All of that's coming out, and it's going to come out in articles and information that we're feeding to companies that buy from this platform.
All good?
Is there any questions? There's a lot. Did you have any questions?
I had a small question.
Please, love to answer it.
I know you had showed earlier the information of how it shows you each. I'm just trying to see if there's any forecasting where you can actually, it gathers all the data for you. Say you're not using a certain software, your company's not using, can it link to tell you, hey, this is what you should use and give you a potential savings?
So we launched this 5 months ago. So if I really break down the facts, the cool thing is we're really telling the story early on about how to give us the data to tell your story. Okay. And so right now that story is really its infancy around what you're asking there, which is a automated report to show variances and to give you the outputs you want that you today have to read or figure out. And so your question earlier, like I have to go figure that out. I can't get into Azure. It's not easy to find that out. Those should be automated reports. The data's at your fingertips. We have to go build the story. We have to aggregate the data together, and then we have to build the reporting metrics. Okay. And so right now we're having client came to us and said, this is literally, Brad, our conversation was great earlier because the comment you made was right on. It's problem solving. And so building Rapid Scale, which eventually sold to Cox, it was all problem solving. And we built a successful company. This is problem solving. You're problem solving on scale for IT leaders that want a simple report for the executive team, meaning their CIO, or the CIO to the CFO, and then that team to the board. And so if you build that report in a way in which it's consumable and it's logical, you can figure out where the unnecessary resources. So you still have to manually kind of tell somebody this, but you have to comprise the report easily, because if you don't, which I did this before, it takes tons of time, a huge amount of cost to do this, because you have to understand the resources too. So you have to understand the data across data set to make it make sense too. Because if you really don't understand it, you can't talk to it. And so that's probably one of the hardest things is it's great to compile the data, but you got to be able to speak intelligently to the data. And so, in this early phase, it's data aggregation to doing exactly what you said. One of the fastest growing companies in Texas is a client of ours, and they said, can you solve this problem? So we go to solve the problem, and we figure out, okay, wait a second, we need to give them real-time access to log in data for everybody touching the system because they got top security clearance. And the core of the system is it's a partnership with Salesforce. You're going to see PR coming out on this relationship. But we're doing that for security and compliance reasons, because security and compliance needs to be in place for this platform, because people aren't going to give us their IT data unless we have a good security and compliance wrapper. This is read-only data. It's no read-write data. So we're using this data to tell an expense, supplier and resource, story. But once you start to get trends of this information of where people go, what they do, you can start mimicking it. So it's important that compliance and security is wrapped really high level in this, so you can't get employee trends off of this. Does that make sense? And so what you're asking for is a report. I could tell you within 6 months, that report is going to be amazing because the data is there and we're starting to build and our teams are starting to build that story of what that looks like.